Okay, I make it 11:46, so we might get started on our next session at Get Digital. Good morning, welcome back to Get Digital. My name is Sean Donnelly. I'm a senior analyst at a company called eConsultancy. I'm based in London. Um, it's my job to identify and analyze and evaluate trends that impact the marketing profession and can manifest themselves in terms of new tools and new tactics, which ultimately require new skills. And one of those domains that's in a constant state of flux, of course, is social media. And so I'm delighted to host your next session at Get Digital. As you've seen, if you've looked at our schedule throughout Get Digital, we'll be joined by panels of experts on topics relating to digital marketing and e-commerce, experts who will answer your questions. And so our first Ask Me Anything or AMA session is on the topic of social media. And so I'm very pleased to be joined by Rosemary Clancy, who is a former colleague of mine, and she was actually part of the original team that used to run Get Digital when we started running Get Digital back around 2009 or 2010 or something like that. Rosie is now the head of engagement strategy at Oracle. We've also got Jane Casey, who's head of digital content at Pluto. We've got Malachy Callan, who is the marketing communications manager at Munich Re Automation Solutions. And we've got Anne-Marie Boyne, who's the founder of a great new business called the Sleep Care Company. Over the last week or so, as people have been registering for Get Digital, they've been encouraged to submit their questions for discussion. And so we have a load of questions to get us started with this discussion. But just as a reminder for our audience, this is an AMA, so it's a really good opportunity to ask expert practitioners to share their expert guidance. So please do continue to ask questions in the Q&A function there, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. So I understand that the chat function is disabled, so please do use the Q&A function and we'll do our best to address any questions, as many questions as we can. So without further delay, I'll start with some questions that have been submitted over the last few days. And if you'll forgive me, you'll see me looking sideways. It's just at my second screen where I've collated some of these questions. And maybe a first question, which I think is a nice one to open the discussion, is basically to our panel. What brands do you think are doing social right, either in Ireland or kind of further afield worldwide? Do you have any thoughts on that? And you know, just to pick someone, just to get the discussion going, Jane, I might pick you to be the
first.
I
was going to jump in there. Well, thanks so much for having me. First of all, it's really nice to be asked to do this. This is my first virtual webinar. It feels very strange. I feel like I'm just in a normal Zoom call. But thanks so much for having me. I would have to say my favorite brand social account at the moment is Ryanair. They are, I don't know if anyone's on TikTok, and I know there's a couple of questions about TikTok, but they are absolutely killing it. They really are. They're posting consistently. They are jumping on trends as soon as they happen, and they're having an awful lot of cut through. So I would say TikTok, Ryanair is absolutely incredible. When it comes to like the likes of e-commerce, social selling, I think anecdotally, I would say JD Sports is really killing it when it comes to selling on social. So I check them out on Instagram. But look, I mean, I would say just always, every time you see an ad in your newsfeed or when you see an ad in your stories or on TikTok, always just take notice of it. If it's something that grabs your attention, write it down. You never know when something might inspire you for one of your campaigns. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Thanks, Jane. I might just address that question to one other person, if Anne-Marie, Rose, or Malachy, if you've anything has jumped out at you.
Yeah, I suppose looking locally, there's a few kind of bright rising stars in our country that I believe do a lot more than focus on a product or service, and they do what social media is really increasingly becoming about, which is fostering a sense of community and getting a lot of buy-in from their audience. And a key example of that would be the likes of the Happy Pair, who have built a sort of movement around their services, their offering. They've got a legitimate community that, you know, hops in the sea with them every morning, and everything they do on social media, it really has become more about what they're about, and as a result has built a great sense of credibility and buy-in from their customers, to the point where their shop, I think it's in Greystones, has become a sort of pilgrimage for a lot of people that live that way of life. So there's brands like them, and I think Wild Era, who are a clothing brand that are kind of veering away from fast fashion and all of the stuff you kind of see from Zara and ASOS, and it's very much about sustainability. And I think that these brands that are really honing in on who their customer is and who their audience are, and walking a mile in their shoes, and really trying to reflect the lifestyle they live, are for me the ones that I'm kind of impressed by. As a person who studied marketing, I generally am quite cynical, and when I see someone actually strike a chord and click with me, I know they're doing something right. I know that that's someone I remember and I will actually buy into. So
yeah. I'm with you, Malachy. I'm quite a cynical person, and you're right. The Happy Pair guys are very good at what they do, but I'm so cynical. I'm just like, God, those guys are just too happy all the time.
Yeah. We can be the cynical pair.
Yeah, very good. There's two things that sort of jumped out there. One is around content, and one is around organic, because I guess in terms of thinking about the Happy Pair, that they have been very good at cultivating this kind of it's a community almost, and so that makes me think about well, one, is there room for organic social, and sort of how might that fit in? And I might ask you your thoughts on that, Rosie. But then there's kind of the other side of that is around content, and so how do we understand the content that our audience wants to see? Because Malachy, you said it's, you know, those brands that you mentioned are very clear on their audience. So maybe in terms of that idea for content, Anne-Marie, you might have some thoughts on that. But we'll take the organic side of that question first, Rosie. I might sort of point that in your direction.
Yeah, so kind of picking up on what Malachy said there, I think they're great examples where there's a real authentic story and there's a personal brand. So when I was thinking of brands, ones that came to mind for me are Chupi, Happy Out, you know, a coffee shop that's nearby, and they have a few locations, and they're keeping it simple and they're keeping it authentic, and they really know their audience. I mean, you put up a picture of melted cheese and I'm there, and with Chupi, it's really authentic stories about the craftsmanship and what it means, and the sentimentality and the heirlooms that are created through the jewelry that's created. So I think when you're thinking about organic social, the more you know about your audience, the better, and the more that you can really hone your content into those specific personas and understand their needs, understand their emotional needs and what it is that they're looking to achieve. And if you can align with that, then you're going to have a very powerful message and strategy to your content. So when you asked, is there still room for organic social? So in my role, I work with the sales teams in Oracle. We support the sales teams engage their customers in creative and interesting ways. So it's all about having the right content, a good message, and engaging customers both digitally and through other channels that the sales teams would use. So for us, in my world, organic social is the sales team's relationships with their customers and with their prospects. So it's in that B2B sales environment. And, you know, really the role of social there is for engaging new contacts and also building on relationships with existing customers. And it's all about keeping the customer engaged and informed and educated. You know, they want to be informed in their decision, and social really helps them in their buying journey. So our content needs to match that buying journey and needs to match those customer needs. So if I take virtual events as an example, so webinars that we would run, you know, pretty much every day, there's a webinar on somewhere in Europe with Oracle, and their email marketing and organic social by activating our sales teams are two of the main drivers of registrations to those webinars. And it's because the webinar is probably that bit further down the funnel, particularly where we're leveraging existing relationships, and the sales teams are using that marketing touch point to be able to keep their customer informed and up to date. So there, what we do is to help activate the sales teams. We provide fresh, nice social media content. We provide it to them in a platform called Dynamic Signal. We have a white labeled product for them, and it's I think they call it an employee engagement and content amplification tool. Basically, it houses all of the content, Oracle content and third-party content, make it easy for the sales teams to find that content and to share it in a personalized way. So that also gamifies the content for the sales teams. They get points, there's leaderboards, and it creates a bit of competition, which in sales is always really important. So I suppose I'm looking at organic content from a slightly different perspective, but when you have sales teams, like we've 5,000 sales reps across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, they're a huge organic social amplification tool is the wrong word, but they're that engine that really helps reach our customers with the right message at the right time.
Thanks, Rose. That's a really good and a really comprehensive answer. And if I remember correctly, I think the other side of our question there was about understanding the content that our audience wants to see. And you've talked a little bit about that, Rosie, in terms of creating personas, which I think is a really interesting one, because it's kind of marketing 101, but it kind of gets forgotten a little bit about in terms of that idea, segmentation, targeting, and positioning. It's so important, and we can forget about it sometimes. Do you have anything to add to that, Anne-Marie, in terms of understanding what content we need to create for our target audiences?
Yeah, it's a really key question, Sean. I think you know, whether you're starting out or you're in the middle of your social media journey, I think I totally concur with Rosie around knowing your customer. So, you know, your market research, your industry, your even using your channels to ask your customers questions. So, you know, you might on Instagram do a poll and ask them things that they like and don't like. You could do a Survey Monkey if you had an email database, or again, you could do a short survey on social media and ask them what they like, what they don't like. But combine that with your market research. So know what your industry is, what your product is, what's been said about the products that you're selling. So a simple way of doing that is by social listening. So you could set up a Google alert around the keywords that you want to listen to. So without posting anything, you could do a whole, you know, piece of market research around what has been said, either about you as a brand, about your product, your service. As well, for social listening, you can set up alerts via tools like Hootsuite for those keywords, and just listen to what are people saying, you know, what are their gripes, what are their needs, and you'll soon see patterns and buckets or themes that you can put your content into. So it could be, you know, for example, for a financial institution, it could be, you know, what are the key things at the moment? Is it opening a bank account? Is it saving for a mortgage? Is it fees, etc.? And then you group it into buckets and then develop content around that. For startups and small businesses, you know, there's also things like blogs. You know, blog is a form of social media, and so you don't have to, you know, dive straight into Instagram or LinkedIn if it's not for your business. So blogs are a really good way of using what you have heard through that social listening and your Google alerts and your research, and putting together content that appeals to your audience. So it could be a blog post about those themes, and it's really good when it's helpful content, you know. So use those keywords again in your blogs, and it really helps your search engine optimization. So when you publish that to the internet, people looking for those keywords may come across your blog. Google Trends is another one to see how much demand there is for your product or service. Again, it's free. It's google.com/trends to see, you know, has there been a rise in products? You know, if you look at Google Trends at the moment, for 2020, you know, dry robes, and those products saw a surge at the end of 2020. Again, a phenomenon from, you know, lockdown and people going sea swimming. And you can see that there are companies who saw that happening on social media, and you'll actually see it in the data on Google Trends, the surge, you know, at the end of last year, and now there are new companies selling those products. So it's a really good idea to you know, see what's going on. Once you're established then and have your own website, you can look at Google Analytics. So Google Analytics is what's going on with your own website. So what are people searching for when they find your website? So again, the keywords. So they could be looking for, you know, a warm coat to keep me dry when I'm going sea swimming. Or, you know, it's not necessarily the name of the brand. It might be the public or the everyman's way of describing your product. So look for those keywords in your Google Analytics, and you'll know what are people looking for when they go to your site. Again, on your website, you might have a search bar. So that'll come up in your Google Analytics. What are people searching for on my website? And you'll know what content they're looking for. So if you know that they are looking for a pink swimsuit, and you see a surge in searches for that, and you don't have a pink swimsuit, well, you know that could be something you could develop. And again, that could be something then on your website that you sell, and then you could develop content around that. So there's lots of things to do. If you're not necessarily a product business, you're B2B, you could look at LinkedIn and thought leadership. So it could be you as a leader with an expert opinion and putting out content that's relevant to you. If you're a coach or in business to business, that's the type of content that you could develop.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, for a really thoughtful response there. There's something that you mentioned there that sort of ties in with some of the other questions that we've got in terms of, so you talked about some different channels there, and you talked about blogs, and you talked about some of the tools that we can use to address trends and for content that we need to create. And I guess from a process point of view, one of the questions that came in was how to determine where we should focus our content, or what channels we should be creating that content for. So I guess the question is how do you determine where your social media presence should be? I might address that one towards Jane or Malachy if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. I mean, for me, demographic is massive. You know, if your target audience is 50 plus males who like to play golf on weekends, you're not going to use TikTok. You know, similarly, if you want to target 14 to 20-year-olds, you're probably not going to use Facebook or Twitter. So that would be my number one. What are the age group? You know, that has a heavy influence on what kind of media they consume. And now all the different social platforms are so different in their format of media as well. So I would say, yeah, I mean, look at your demographic and see where they are, find out where they are. Chances are you've already done your market research. You know exactly who you want to hit. So just do a bit of research on what platforms are used by which groups, and go for it. I would say, you know, I personally would be on every platform, as in with my brands. You know, let's say if I have a brand who we are primarily targeting the 18 to 24s, I might put 80% of our time and budget into TikTok, but always have a finger in other pies as well, and see how it performs. And then as time goes on, if Facebook really isn't performing, you know, cut it out of your marketing plan. But I think it's really important to really, you know, trial and error. Like, you know, I think it's so important with social media marketing and content marketing to try everything, absolutely everything, and then listen, and always consume on the platform that you want to advertise on. I think a lot of advertisers think that, you know, oh, well, if you just throw money at the problem on Instagram, you know, that'll sell things. But, you know, to go back to the kind of debate on, you know, where does organic content sit in this, you have to remember that without organic content, these platforms wouldn't exist. So it is just as important. No one's going to go on an app to scroll through ads, you know, unless it's Done Deal or something like that. But I would say, be smart about it in the beginning with your budget, and then listen, monitor, and constantly tweak your plan and where you're putting your budget as you go. And don't be afraid to pull money from somewhere to put it in somewhere else.
Thanks, Jane. Yeah, that's very wise. Listen, monitor, and tweak as you go. And that's the great thing with social media, that you can apply a test budget and then see if something has potential to scale before you choose to commit to bigger amounts of money, which is nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I counted, you mentioned TikTok maybe 4 or 5 times there so far. So I don't know if that's like an expert area of yours, and a few people have actually asked about that. And I guess, there are questions there around. Somebody asked, is it a fad? I don't know if it's a fad because a lot of people are using it. Is it just for brand awareness? Or is there further functionality? And there's somebody who talks about the algorithm here. They said, look, they can't seem to understand the algorithm and what gets views and what doesn't. They say it seems very random. And they're wondering if you, Jane, or anybody else on the panel here who has made use of TikTok for any of your campaigns, have any guidance in terms of how their engagement works.
Yeah, they're very, very closed about it. It's all very Black Mirror. I will say though, it is not random. It is actually more targeted and more strategic than any other platform I've ever used. Just kind of anecdotally, I have a friend of mine who is 22 weeks pregnant. Before she even announced her pregnancy to anybody, each week she was getting videos from women who are 7 weeks pregnant, 12 weeks pregnant. Like, TikTok knew exactly how pregnant she was and what to show her. I wish I could give you some indication of how their algorithm works, but obviously, that's kind of what gets them, that's why they're so big and they're very closed about it. But TikTok, yeah, I mean, is it an area of my expertise? Kind of. In the past year, my agency Pluto, we really kind of dove headfirst into TikTok after we created a campaign for the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre. It was a pro bono campaign we did for them. Actually, 2 of my colleagues will be talking about it later today. I have to. I think they'll be presenting on it. But what we did is we sourced 22 of the biggest TikTok content creators in Ireland. And when I say these have massive followings, I really mean it. Some have up to 1 million followers, far more than the kind of big Irish influencers you'd see on the likes of Instagram. It's really kind of an unknown, really, to marketing managers and brand managers. So we sourced 22 of them. We brought them to a workshop where we discussed consent, the idea of consent, how to discuss it among your peers. And we kept them for the day, and then we sent them off, and they created their own content on TikTok to discuss consent and to kind of open up that conversation with their followers and kind of make it less of a taboo. And it was a massive success. And it was great to do that for Dublin Rape Crisis Centre. So off the back of that, we really kind of saw the potential of TikTok. So we sought to absolutely go headfirst into it. And over the past year, we've done some really incredible campaigns for a lot of brands. I mean, to answer the question, is it a fad? I would answer it with another question and say, who cares? I mean, that's where that audience is now. Obviously, you have to be agile. It could be gone in a year. Who cares? Who cares? It's where they are now. This is where you need to spend your money. This is where you need to invest. I mean, obviously, only if your demographic are, kind of that age group, but it is widening. I'm in my 30s and I'm absolutely hooked on it. Maybe that's work. Maybe it's lockdown. I don't know. I mean, as for, is it brand awareness? Yes, it is great for brand awareness, but we've also recently started selling TikTok ad placements. So TikTok have introduced a whole load of new ad products that really kind of, they're really, budget friendly. I've noticed like sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 times the reach on TikTok as opposed to a campaign with the same budget on Instagram. So it's really great. And also they've introduced loads of new features for social selling as well. So kind of taggable TikToks and things like that. So Yeah, I mean, I would say if you haven't thought about it already, definitely look into it. It mightn't be right for your brand, but it's definitely worth exploring. There's a massive opportunity there, and yeah, it mightn't be here in a year's time. So now do it for sure.
That's right. You know what? Like creating marketing budgets and everything now isn't necessarily something that's sort of one and done at the start of the year. We kind of need to keep that live, and I'm sorry to use that word agile there, and sort of update our budgets as we go. You mentioned the word social commerce there, and we actually have a very specific question about that, because somebody asks, they say, look, I get confused on social commerce. It sounds like social media marketing. How are brands actually selling through social media? And I think it's an interesting one, because a lot of the different platforms like TikTok and others are now creating transactional functionality in their ecosystems to keep people within those ecosystems. How do you see brands selling through social media? And actually, are there brands that you think that are doing a good job of selling directly through social? Malik, we haven't heard from you in a while. Any thoughts?
Yeah. I really was enjoying actually what the guys were saying previously. But in terms of social commerce, I think that this goes to the direction the world is going. So if you look at us now, this would have taken place in the Helix, but instead we are here in a digital conference. Zoom has replaced our meeting rooms, our conference halls. And like we used to refer to websites over the last 20 years, we call them our digital shop fronts. Well, now I believe our social media pages will become our digital shop fronts, and people will go onto our page and treat it as a shop in the future. Every single tool is moving this way. I know that Facebook has Facebook shops, Pinterest has buyable pins, Instagram as well. Every single, even Snapchat has introduced this. It's completely natural. It makes complete sense. What makes people purchase more these days is lessening the barriers, is quickening the journey. I've noticed myself borderline unconsciously purchasing because it was so simply made. I like that, I click that, it's in the trolley, and then Google autofills my details, and all of a sudden I have €100 less in my bank account. And this is the direction the world is going. It makes complete sense. If you are in an e-commerce space, you can't ignore it. If you are a seller of consumer goods, B2C, you really, really need to focus on this very soon, as brick and mortar looks increasingly questionable as a future outlook, especially since this whole scenario happened.
Don't say it. Don't say the word.
I won't say the word. I won't say the word. But right now, e-commerce has gone through the roof. Companies that haven't digitally enabled their shop fronts, their website shops, that haven't fixed that aspect of their business have fallen behind tremendously, versus those that have embraced digital commerce and social commerce. They've exploded. And I think that, yeah, it's just a huge, massive opportunity, and it's something you can't ignore, particularly for B2C.
Totally agree that user experience is so important. And yeah, how easy it is with autofill. It's like, I just need to know the 3 little numbers in the back of my card and I'm done. We did some user experience testing recently, and to get a free trial, so a free cloud trial with a competitor was taking 14 clicks, and for Oracle it was taking 5 clicks. Now it's still probably 2 clicks too many, but the more you can remove those barriers, the easier it is for customers. In our case, they're getting on to do a free trial, so it's a matter of try before you buy. But that's really important in the B2B world. I suppose for us, the role of social in sales is probably a bit different. Again, it's back to that kind of relationship building and the role social plays in terms of the customer buying journey and helping people have the right information at different stages in the buying journey. But yeah, I think the user experience when it comes to content as well, as Maliki said, we're all at home. The buying experience is so different. Our consumers are looking to check stuff out on their own time. They're doing their research before they speak to sales. So video has become an even more important sales tool to help our customer understand the products and how it's going to help them, because Zoom fatigue is well and truly set in for people. So, they don't have the time for an hour demo unless they're at a point where they're ready to make that decision where they want a more customized demo. So making the content, thinking about your customer's buying journey and making the content and the experience along that journey is really important.
And just to acknowledge the person that asked that question, they also asked about brands that are doing well in terms of social selling. Is there anybody that jumps out or has jumped out at any of the panel in terms of those brands?
Well, I think I mentioned at the start, I mentioned JD Sports, and I only mentioned them because their remarketing is incredible, and I have actually shamelessly, I know how it works, and yet I bought those Adidas runners that I keep seeing in my stories because they were right there. So I would say go to the JD Sports website and then go off the website and see what comes up in your feed, and it's really, really targeted. It's really good.
And in terms of completing that transaction, and if you're getting targeted on Instagram or in other places, are you then completing that transaction within that Instagram environment?
So they would do their ads. I'd get a lot of them through Instagram stories. It would be shoppable, so you'd click through to the JD Sports website, but it's always the exact product I was looking at. It's almost like they know what they're doing, but they're great. I'd recommend checking them out.
Yeah, one of the things I think is really interesting is that in terms of if they're all marketers in the virtual conference here, if we think of the marketing funnel, we see the likes of Facebook. They're kind of they're moving down the funnel to facilitate transactions within the Facebook environment, whereas before it used to be, we'll direct you back to the website, whereas now they're trying to keep that within the Facebook environment because they also get that data then. And then on the other side, if you think of Amazon, which was generally somewhere where you go to Amazon when you know what you want to buy already. It's not necessarily a great place for discovery, but now they're getting in on the live streaming act to facilitate that kind of a discovery of products as well. So they're kind of like moving up the funnel. So it's interesting to see kind of what those platforms are doing there. So again, we've been talking about selling there a little bit, I guess, in terms of social commerce. And I guess then in terms of the role that social has for selling, is that more of a B2B thing, or how do you see that balance between that strategy between B2B and B2C and for social? Rosie, I might ask you that question.
Yeah, so I suppose social is part of the marketing mix and it's part of the sales toolkit as well. So in terms of the role it plays, I mean, we've done correlation studies to show what is the influence of social on our sales pipeline, and there is a really, really strong influence on our pipeline. So we show that it helps. But we used to, I suppose in the early days, we used to do a lot of tracking through to the opportunity level to say, are we using social media? Are we engaging this account with social media? If so, is it creating new business and new opportunities for us? And kind of once we established that and proved that it works, we stopped with having to measure and track it all the time, because we just knew that it worked. And we kind of then evolved to say, well, look, we don't track the influence of a pen or a laptop on the sales cycle. We just know that it's part of the toolkit. So I suppose there is a strong influence on our pipeline. And also in the post-sales cycle as well, where it's really important to maintain and build on the relationships that we have with customers. Social plays a big role there. And that's when you're into, customer advocacy, ensuring that our customers' voice is visible through our brand, that we're sharing customer stories, customer references, that we're inviting customers to advocate on behalf of Oracle and show the business impact of what our technology does on their business. And social provides an accessible, easy way for them to be able to do that. I would say also through communities and customer advisory panels and things like that is another way that social helps us in the post-sale cycle. We don't measure it in terms of revenue, but we measure it in terms of the customer engagement, the relationship. Are we establishing deeper relationships into the account? Are we getting more relationships with new types of personas into the account? So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thanks. Okay, if we're talking about selling, we also need to talk about return on investment. And so I wonder if the panel have any thoughts in terms of how do we measure the return on investment of social media? Are there frameworks or tools that you use to do that? And Marie, we haven't heard from you in a while. Do you have any thoughts to kick us off there?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Yeah, it's really important to show yourself and show your bosses, or that there is a return on investment. And so for every marketing euro that you're spending, that you're getting something back. So in the past, for the companies I've worked for, we've looked at things like the cost per acquisition, so CPA. So tracking everything to its nth degree, really. So if you're selling through Facebook or Instagram, you would need to have your funnel set up. So what's a funnel? Apart from in baking and cooking, it's basically looking at the journey on your website that a customer takes. So if you are putting some content out on Facebook or Instagram, they click through. So where are they going on your website? So is it directly to that Adidas runners, or do they go through a few pages? So you make sure you have all that tracked, and then you're able to track the journey and see, have they gone through, put the product in the cart, which would be the last stage of your funnel, and what was the cost of that transaction. So the cost of running the ad to get them. So obviously some products have bigger cost per acquisition than others, but it's a good idea to put the tracking in place. Even things like when you're setting up your website, to put the Facebook pixel down if you are going to be using Facebook for your content, and that shows where everything is coming from and how it's tracking. It'll come into your Google Analytics. So again, I totally I'm all about the data, making your decisions on what the data is telling you, not just a hunch, or if someone in a meeting, suggests, so why don't we use, Snapchat because my daughter is using it. It's really, it's actually, let's get the research and the data, our customers, our demographic, using that and using the data to inform your decision rather than just a hunch. So yeah, it's really important to show return on investment. And even now, as a new business owner, I don't have the budget of a large corporate. So I'm really going to be looking cleverly at how I'm going to spend my marketing when I'm selling and when I'm telling people about my products. And it's going to be really important that I see something working. So if something isn't working, that's the joy of social media, that you can pivot and you can switch to something else. So it's not like TV advertising, where you have spent an awful lot of money on putting the ad together and on getting that spot and running it on TV, and it runs for a certain amount of time. On social, if something isn't working and you've run it on Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest or wherever your audience is, and it doesn't work, you can pull it and put that money into something else. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. Well, I have something else to add to that, I guess. So you, as somebody who's running a business, Anne-Marie, and I guess you're probably managing all this stuff yourself at the moment. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, I am.
At what point then would you consider outsourcing social media? And do you have any thoughts in terms of, is it a good idea to outsource social media management, or when is it a good idea? Are there considerations there to think about that?
Yeah, and interesting, that question is, Sean. I'm now on both sides of the fence. I've worked in agency land and in client side, for major financial institutions and telecommunications as well, where we would have done certain work ourselves in-house, but also used an agency to help us. And I think an agency, there's definitely a huge role that they play, in terms of, your media buying and the importance of that, and working with your team. But yeah, for startups and small businesses, it totally depends. So whether you have the resource in-house to do it yourself. At the moment, I'm very much in startup mode. I'm in branding, research, product range, service range mode. So it's I'm not quite at the point where I'm selling, but I'm building a relationship with my customers. So I'm before launch, let's say. So I'm not spending the marketing yet. So at the moment I am doing it, but I know I have so much to do that I will end up needing help doing it, definitely. And at the moment I don't have the resource there. So but definitely in the future, I would see it as a collaborative venture, in that the person that you hire to outsource it to needs to know your brand ethos, needs to know who your customer is, needs to know, what who you are as a brand, what do you believe in, who you're, all of that is really important. And then, yes, definitely you could hire someone. Virtual assistants as well are becoming really popular for startups, because startups are small businesses are so busy in the actual day-to-day of running their business that they need help. So I can definitely see in the future that I would do that.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. I wonder if anyone else from our panel has anything just to add to that.
Yeah, I just think that with outsourcing, I remember when I was in my earlier years, coming out of university, coming out of ECU actually, and I always felt it was kind of a dirty concept to speak from the viewpoint of a brand, but not actually be within the company themselves. But when I was in a position where I was a consultant, and when I was consulting very small businesses, like Anne-Marie was speaking about, you realize that a lot of these people, they really have to be very careful about their scarcest resource, which is time. And they have to kind of call it as it is. If they don't really understand the fundamental ways of working with social media, the benefits, it really is the most responsible decision to actually find someone who does, or find a team who can. And again, an important thing that Anne-Marie said was, it's really important that they can identify who the brand is, what they are, really get to the fulcrum of what they're about, so that it is an honest voice being communicated externally. That the way of speaking, the brand voice, is captured right. But I do think it's important. I think that so many SMEs, they try to do it all themselves, but they will be very, very over encumbered with stuff to do. They won't have time to get fully activated, to really devote the time to understanding the platform, how they work, and even the more technical aspects, the marketing, the pixels, the tracking, all of this. So I've come to a place now where I think, you have to be honest with yourself. Are you underselling your company and your products by doing it yourself? And can someone who knows the platforms do it better and handle it better? And I think that's a conversation most small companies need to have, especially companies that can't have a full marketing wing, or can't even have an individual as a marketer.
Yeah. I have a follow-on question from that, and I'm sure Rosie might have something to say about this. But obviously there are a lot of marketing technology vendors now that are offering tools that facilitate machine learning generated content. And so I wonder what our panel thinks about those kind of tools, that AI generated content and conversational technologies and so on. Again, what are the considerations there to say, okay, this is when we might be able to use something like this, and maybe this is when we shouldn't, perhaps. We might start with Rosie.
Yeah, I saw that question there. I think it's a great question. So I suppose if you start like top of the funnel, we're trying to find out what our customers are interested in. We would use purchase intent tools. So Bombara is a tool that we would use to look to see what are the surges in interest amongst our customers, like what are they researching online, what are they interested in. Then we would look to see, well, when it comes to Oracle content, what are they engaging in? What is their digital body language like? Are they attending events? Are they downloading white papers? Do they have support requests? Are they in touch with our sales team? Then we would look at their sales history, look to see what kind of product set they have or don't have, or what would be the next best product for them. Then we'd look at a persona level to see, well, based on the product set that they have, what type of personas are we engaging with and what are the gaps. So once you've kind of mapped out that, you get a good understanding of what your customer is interested in, what their portfolio is, and what are the best next steps for them. Maybe as well where they're at in terms of their maturity. If it comes to cloud, you know, are they just using it for test and dev, or do they have mission critical apps on that technology? And so that you get a feeling for where they're at in terms of their maturity stage. Once you really understand your customer, then I think you can introduce more of the automated engagement types of tools. But if you don't understand your customer really well, and if you don't have mapped out a good kind of next step for them, you're kind of shooting in the dark a bit. So when it comes to then more of the automated technology, we would use our own tool, Eloqua, as an email marketing solution. It's more of a one-way tool, so we would use it more for newsletters or event invites, or something that doesn't require a dialogue. For dialogue, and depending on the customer type, so say if the customer has been dormant or hasn't engaged for a long time, or we see that they tried something but have stopped using, if we're looking to re-engage them, but maybe it doesn't warrant a person being involved in that discussion, that's where we might use a conversational kind of tool. So Conversica is a tool that's good for that. Then in terms of being able to understand the kind of content paths that the customer goes through, and if we are sending them content, what it is that they're engaging with, Eloqua is good for that as well. And Path Factories is another tool that's an intelligent kind of content tool. So I think it starts with knowing your customer, knowing where they're at, knowing where they're trying to get to, knowing if you've got the product and content and resources that can help them along that journey, and then mapping out the conversation paths thereafter, and always having an opportunity for the customer to be able to get in touch with an actual person when they're ready to, if they're ready to.
I'm sure some of the Oracle tools do this, but I've seen Adobe tools that do this, and another company called Phrasey that does like email marketing subject line optimization. And it's kind of a weird one. You might think, well, how many ways can I write an email subject line? And turns out there's thousands of ways, and some of these tools just can do it better in terms of optimizing email open rates than human beings can. And I think that's it's the reason I mention that is because it's a very simple implementation of using AI generated content without getting too into two-way communications and so on. I've wondered, Jane, just from an agency point of view, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I completely agree with Rosie and yourself. Like, I mean, there's so many different tools that you can use that will, I guess, hack human psychology for you and, optimize your open rates and everything. I think the most important thing what Rosie said to me there was give people an option and an opportunity to talk to someone real as well. I think I'm a fond believer in social media and social selling, and everything digital is really a reflection of where we are culturally, and human connection. So I think once we go down the route of overusing AI, it's for example, the other day I saw that they released a new Nirvana song that was created by artificial intelligence. It analyzed all of Nirvana's old songs, created a brand new song. And while it was cool, it scared me to the bottom of my soul. That is this where we're going? So look, what I would say is there's so many different tools out there that you can use to help your marketing efforts, but always have a bit of humanity in there as well, and always give your customers the option to talk to someone in real life, essentially.
Yeah, I think on that humanity piece, certainly when I've been advising brands and they ask those kind of questions, I guess the question I ask is this about optimizing the customer experience, or are you trying to reduce costs? And you need to be very clear on the reality there, because if it's about reducing costs in the short run, that might look good, but in the long run, you might have really frustrated customers who just go off and complete their shopping elsewhere.
Exactly.
I make it 12:36, which gives us about 9 minutes to go, and there are some open questions in our question box, and I guess some of the questions that are coming in are very the kind of operational questions from people who are working in specific spaces or sectors and want to ask the panel their role or their view on how they would approach certain things. And one of them was from somebody who says that they're working in a service-based startup in the B2B sector, and they want to create brand awareness and spread their offering on social media. Their target clients are organizations with a minimum of 50 employees. And to reach them, they've opted for LinkedIn and for Facebook. And this person is asking the panel, do you think they need other platforms, more platforms, and why? Maybe, Anne-Marie, can we address that one to you?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, service-based industry, there's still so much, you can do. I don't know what exactly it is, but LinkedIn definitely, and there are tools within LinkedIn that there are paid tools as well that you could use. Again, use your money wisely, but there's a social selling tool on LinkedIn. Let me think of the name of it. I've used it on an enterprise level across companies. Sales Navigator, but they have an individual license that's much cheaper than an individual can use. Mm-hmm. So definitely use that, and find out. Again, it's like social listening, but it's on LinkedIn. And you find out the people in organizations that you need to influence and connect with, and listen to them, and then engage with them at the right time. You can send them emails, etc. So it's the paid part of LinkedIn that you can use. But I would say, there are other tools, you mightn't think, but Instagram is actually a good one as well. I see a lot of service-based people on that. They're not selling products, but they're selling their service, as in they're engaging with people. So, a lot of coaches are doing really well, just providing really valuable content on there. I don't know if you're the person is in the coaching area, but people like Mark Fennell is one guy on Instagram, and he gives out a lot of free resource and lots of tips. He does Instagram lives with people, other people in his industry, or just to share knowledge. And as a result, he may not get a sale there and then, but he's influencing people, and they might come to him then to work with them. So there are other ways of engaging on social media. And again, if you are service-based, it's showing your thought leadership. So whether that's on Instagram, on LinkedIn, or via blog posts on your website. So write about the things that you are an expert in, and get them out there. Share them with people. Create white papers, blog posts. And it's getting in front of those people that you want to influence.
Thank you.
I'd agree. Just to add to that, I'd agree with Anne-Marie. I suppose it depends if you're the owner manager of the business, and the people who work with you as well. It's really dependent on your personal brand, and that service-based industry is so based on trust and authenticity and proof points as to how you can help other customers or how you've helped other clients as well. Fiona Buckley is another person, when Anne-Marie said about a coach, who I thought has a really good profile. I think particularly if you're starting out or if you've a small team, as Malachy said, kind of think about your time and maybe don't spread yourself too thickly or too thinly. Rather think about what's going to be your hero asset. So if it's going to be a white paper or if it's going to be a video series and you're giving away a small amount of your IP or your experience or whatever, think about your hero assets and how you can really use that across multiple different channels. So if you do a video series, say for example, use LinkedIn, upload your videos, maybe do a live stream on LinkedIn, do stories on Instagram, whatever it is. So think about the versatility of your hero assets and how they can adapt to other platforms.
Thanks, Rosie. Jane, earlier on, you talked about the example of working with I think it was the Rape Crisis Center and working with influencers to open the discussion about consent. And I wonder if you have any advice for kind of social enterprises and sort of non-profits in terms of how they can grow their following and their interactions on social media.
Yeah, well, I actually started my career in an NGO. I was doing web management and social media management. So I'm, well used to working with a shoestring budget and somehow getting results at the end of the month. Just very practically speaking, I would say, your social content should be all about education. So I would say try and distill your manifesto down into really snappy, concise, either short videos, little graphics. Really, hone in on your message and create content that's really easy to share. I think, going back to, our work with the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre, that was basically influencer outreach. Those influencer marketing. So I would say is try and engage with influencers. I know it's kind of a dirty word, influencers, creators, who share your values, who you think might support your cause. And just drop them a DM on Instagram, ask them to share something, engage them in any way, maybe get them to do a little video on it. Go for the micro influencers. It's going to be very difficult to get Ross Purcell to do something, but, kind of smaller local influencers with, 5,000-10,000 people, try and get them on board and be consistent. Don't be discouraged if your followers don't absolutely shoot up. I see another message has come in here asking any tips for growing Instagram followers. That's up there with how do I make my video go viral? It's there's no solid answer, but consistency is key, absolutely key. So post all the time. Don't overthink your content because you never know what's going to be the one that blows up, and focus more on engagement, your engagement rate over your followers. I always say to clients that your follower numbers are essentially a vanity metric, we call it. It doesn't mean a whole lot. People can buy followers. It doesn't mean much. In fact, I saw an agency a couple of years ago created a fake influencer by using stock photos of a girl buying millions of followers, and they started to get brand deals for this, fictional person. So look at engagements. Really, if you have 100 followers and 10 of those people are liking your picture or commenting, then that's a 10% engagement rate. That means your content's working. And just keep going, just be consistent.
Thanks, Jane. So some great insights there. I'd make it 12:44, so I might just a quick fire question just for everybody in the room in terms of what do you see as the future of social media, or how do you think small businesses or even multinationals should make use of those platforms in the future? Jane, you're my top left, my screen, so we might sort of start with you.
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball, so I have absolutely no idea what's coming down the line. But what I do know is no one predicted TikTok 5 years ago, and here we are. No doubt, what's big now will influence whatever the next big thing is. So my biggest advice would be, don't just read about trends and predictions from the likes of Wired or Social Media Examiner or whatever. I would say consume, be on the apps, listen, see what people are interested in. and take risks with new platforms. That's my advice. I don't think anyone knows what's coming down the line, but just be reactive.
Love it. Yeah. Anne-Marie?
Yeah, no crystal ball here either, but definitely it's about your customer. Where are they hanging out? So what platform are they using, and be there to talk to them. You know, whether that's Pinterest, whether it's LinkedIn, yeah. And then I would also say, you know, build your newsletter, your email database, because you know, you want to be able to talk to people directly one-to-one. And if, for example, your social media platform goes tomorrow, and you've built millions of followers, you do need a way to be able to talk to your customer one-to-one. So look at those marketing channels as well.
Thank you. Malachy?
Yeah, I just think if you instead of using a crystal ball and looking forward and being Mystic Malachy, if you look back and where we were before, when I was a wee sprite, it was PR. It was companies choosing how they were presented to the world. It was a one-way communication. And then social media came along and it was very much a two-way communication. And if Air said they were great, there was a million comments saying, no, they are not. And I feel like the future is where it's that community thing. It's that I think content will be co-created, user-generated, and the community, the companies that win will be the companies that build communities. And they are the ones winning right now, but I think that that's going to keep accelerating. You look at GoPro, like all of their content is user-generated, and it just builds momentum. That's where I think it's going. Again, it's a small subset, but I think that that's going to explode.
Yeah, I think that there's kind of two trends. You know, you've got the TikTok kind of generation where, you know, there's dance challenges, there's things people can participate in, there's things where people can really express themselves in really creative ways. And then you've got something like Clubhouse, which is stripped back. I mean, it's kind of nearly a phone call, where it's a closed, tight-knit community. I think as people get more and more conscious of data privacy and security, they look for more of those closed communities where trust is really important and knowing people within the network is really important. So I think there's kind of two diverging trends. One is even more out there, creative things that people can get involved in, like community-based things, user-generated content. And then there's the more closed private networks where people maybe go for more of a network or a relationship or education-based kind of platforms.
That's really interesting. So you talked about sort of more closed communities, and Anne-Marie talked about email, and I actually think email is a really interesting one. It's our oldest digital marketing tactic, and it is the only one that can guarantee sort of personalized sort of delivery at scale, and quite often it is underutilized by a lot of brands. When they talk about first or personalized email, it's literally just Dear Sean, and then the rest of the email is the same. So I think there's, in terms of closed comms, email, and businesses investing then in their data, their first party data, there's definitely something in that. And a quote comes to mind, I'm not too sure who it's from, that idea of we tend to overestimate the impact of something in the short run, but underestimate it in the long run. And when Rosie and I used to evangelize social media marketing 10 years ago at these free digital marketing boot camps in DCU, we never could have foreseen the power that Twitter and Facebook would have on news cycles and disinformation and stuff like that. Yeah, so I guess we always need to come back to our fundamentals, don't we? So I make it 12:50, so we'll wrap it up there. So I guess all that's left for me is to thank Dane and Rosemary and Malachy and Anne-Marie for taking the time out of your day and for providing really insightful and considered and thoughtful answers to the questions that people submitted today. Thank you to the people who submitted questions, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, and we're already a little bit over our time. So thanks very much to the panel. GetDigital will be back with our next session at 1 o'clock, so make sure to take a break and get a cup of tea, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. So final thanks to the panel. Thanks very much for your time. See you.
Thank you. Thanks to the team.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye.